There was a gentleman who died on the 13th of this month, and his name was Kenny Baker. And he's not really known for a bunch of stuff. Kenny Baker was an actor. He was a part player. He was one of the people that worked behind the scene, but he was very well known for a supporting character. Kenny Baker was the man who lived inside the R2-D2 can for the Star Wars franchise. When the little thing went, right, it was Kenny Baker inside this thing doing that. And the why it's important is because when you look at something like Star Wars, this movie franchise was huge, right? I mean, I remember as a kid going to see Star Wars, Luke and Leia and Han, Darth Vader, right? And you got the good guy, you got the guy who's good, but he's a little shady. You got the princess, you got the great villain, and you've got all these strong characters as you go through the movies. And then you've got this little robot that's cruising around all over the place. And he's got some parts here and there that make him important to the story, but you could have done without it. He's what's known as a supporting. He's that one person that helps support the storyline, gives you interest in the storyline, helps you find things in the storyline that you might not have gotten out of it otherwise. And the actions of the primary story, right, the characters, the primary characters in the story are to really draw you in. Like I said, those supporting cast really add the color to the story. They're the depth of the color in the story. And the story I wanted to talk about today, which I hate to say the word story because I don't believe it's a story. I believe it's fact. I believe it's truth. Comes from 2 Kings 5. And when you turn over to 2 Kings 5, you find there, almost at the very beginning, the name of our leading man. And in this story, the leading man's name is a gentleman named Naaman. Start reading through 2 Kings 5 and you start looking at Naaman, you find right off the bat in 2 Kings 5 verse 1, now Naaman, commander of the army of the king of Syria, was a great and honorable man in the eyes of his master, because by him the Lord had given victory to Syria. He was also a mighty man of valor, but a leper. He's a great man. He's the man that we all look up to. He's the gold winner of the decathlon. He's the General Eisenhower. He's the General Patton. He's the great leader. And you look up to him and you say, not only is he a great leader, but the people who he works under love him and respect him. The people that work under him love him and respect him. He's valorous. He's honorable. He's a leper. He had the single worst disease you could get, especially at that time. This is the disease so disfiguring that as it eats your body away, your nose your ears fall off, your fingers fall off, the peripheral things, your lips might turn blue and break away. Terrible. Terrible. In fact, if you were a leper in Israel, you were required not only to put something over your face, to put a mask on, but you couldn't live with your brothers and sisters anymore. You were no longer a person who had rights in Israel. You were a leper. You lived outside the city walls. You lived by yourself. You lived with other lepers. Terrible disease. No way to fix it. So here we are, we're standing there, and we're looking at this great and valorous man with the worst thing that could happen to him. And as you go into this story, we start looking at the supporting cast. If you drop all the way down back toward the end of the story, you'll find a gentleman named Gehazi. And this is happening in around verse 20. Remember the bulk of the story, Naaman gets leprosy, go to Israel, get cured, come home. So Naaman, at the end of the story, is ecstatic. He's been cured. He had leprosy, and now he doesn't have leprosy. He had the worst thing in the world, and now he doesn't have the worst thing in the world. It's like you've taken a bird and released them from a cage. It's like you've taken a convict who never thought he'd see the light of day again and give him back his freedom. He is ecstatic. And he's riding away with his guys, and up runs the servant of Elisha, Gehazi. And Gehazi says, wait. And here's this very important man, right? This very important man. And he gets out of his chariot and gets down out of his chariot for this man, because this was the first man he met. Remember when he goes up to the house of, when he finally gets to the house of Elisha, he knocks on the door, and Elisha doesn't even come to the door. It's the servant Gehazi. In fact, at this time, shooting Naaman on the road a mile away from their home, because that's respect. And he gets there and he knocks on the door, and it's Gehazi that opens the... He recognizes him. He sees him. And he gets out of his chariot, showing this man respect, the servant respect. And Gehazi says, we actually had some... servants of God come from the mountains, a couple guys, and we're wondering if you couldn't spare a little bit of the silver that you had brought with you, and maybe a couple changes of, say, clothes. We know he's lying, right? I mean, we know he's lying. We have the backstory. Naaman doesn't know. Naaman probably, if Gehazi had said, my master changed his mind, can we have it all? He'd have said, absolutely. Take everything you want. This is the happiest man in the world. He's probably tossing gold and silver out left and right. I did some calculations. And if you take the 75 talents of silver, the 600 shekels of gold, and the 10 changes of clothing, you come up to, in our day and age, about $75,000 worth of stuff. That's a boatload. And he was willing to give every bit of it to the man of God. And Gehazi, I mean, come on. Looks to be about $2,500 worth of stuff. A little silver, a couple changes of clothing. You remember clothing was handmade back then. It's not like he went down to Walmart and picked up a pair of sweatpants and said, here. Gehazi said, we've had a few guys come, and Gehazi's thinking in his mind, it'll be okay. It's nothing. Naaman sticks it on the back of his servants and say, you go with Gehazi and you take it to his house. And Gehazi takes it to his house and he sticks it in his house. And of course the end part of that is, when he finally goes back to Elisha, what does he say? Well, where have you been? Basically, the old where have you been question. It's not like he doesn't know. This is the man who was telling the king of Israel where the Syrians were going to attack. This is the man who, later on we find out, well, they got a prophet who tells the king what you say in your bedchamber. He said, where you been? I said, nowhere. When you ask a little kid where they've been and they say, nothing. What you doing? Nothing. Okay, something, right? Nobody does nothing. Everybody's doing something. And he knew that. Gehazi ends up getting the leprosy that should have been Naaman's. Back up in the story a little bit. Back up to about verse 12. Naaman's furious. He's furious. He's so mad he's grinding his teeth. You can see this man. Who is this person to tell me I have to dip in some nasty river? If you've ever seen pictures of the Jordan, it's nasty. It's brown. They used it probably as their garbage dump. It's muddy. Probably smells bad. Who is this? I don't even know who this person is. And he's telling me to go dip in some nasty river when you got these beautiful rivers back in Damascus. One of them's the Farfar and I can't remember the name of the other one, Abanar and the Farfar. These beautiful rivers. I want to dip in one of those, he says. I want to dip in a beautiful river. And his servants come up to him. I had always envisioned in my mind that it was one servant. I don't know if you carried that vision in your head. That's kind of been the vision of my head, that it was one servant and he came up to him. But more than likely, this was his council of generals. Because remember, this guy's traveling with $75,000. You don't travel at this point in the world with just a couple guys and you're carrying $75,000. He had a train with him. Enough people that when he goes before the king of Israel says this is a pretense to start a war. And his servants come up to him. It says his servants come up to him. And they say, those are more lines, right? If he had said to go chop down the largest tree in the forest with a herring, you'd have been on it. If he had said, go to the sand and collect 10,000 shells from crabs, you'd have been there. If he had said, go kill Philistines, 10,000 Philistines, the people that Israelites hate, he'd have been on it. He said, all you got, and his servants are like, I don't get why you're so mad. He's asking you to do something that is so incredibly simple. I mean, you're saying this is beneath you, and you've come all this way, and he's given you something, a task to do that's nothing. Nothing. And you're furious at him. Well, I mean, we know the end of this part too, right? The men remind him that he would have done something, that he is a great man, he is honorable, and he does finally go down and dip 7 times in the Jordan. And he does come up clean. But these men were there helping him. Look, you would have done anything. And all he's saying is dip in this, sure, nasty water, but do it anyway. Back up even more. All the way down to like the 2nd verse in 2 Kings chapter 5. And at this point, Naaman, you can't describe him as anything less than despondent. Wealthy, he's got plenty of money. Servants, he's got plenty of servants. Valor, I mean, this is the captain of the football team. He's got the head cheerleader. It's his wife. Everything he touches turns to gold. You know, we all know this guy. You can't, there's nothing that he doesn't do that it doesn't come out smelling like a rose on the other end. Nothing. And now he's got the disease that will separate you from family and friends and culture and just generally. You've gone from the top of the world to nothing. The only word I can think of that even comes close to describing this is despondent. You've got to be. You've got to be. When I found out I had prostate cancer, it hit me like a ton of bricks. And I had support, family support, friend support. I'm medical. I could go look up what prostate cancer means and how you deal with it. And I had a disease that can be treated. This guy was out in the cold. And yet, a young girl that they had taken in a raid. She was a slave. Right, she was a slave. They had taken her in a raid, given her to Naaman's wife as a servant. And she hears about it. And she says, oh, that my master was in Israel. Because there's a prophet who could cure him. And the word gets back to Naaman, and it's like he clings to it. He grabs a hope, and he says, I've got a hope. I've got a hope for a cure. And the next verse you find out, then he goes to the king of Syria to say, hey, look, I'm going over there. Is that okay? And here's this young girl she could have been bitter against Naaman. I know there's a prophet in Israel. Who knows how old she was? 12? 15? Who knows? Maybe even as young as 8 or 9. She could have been bitter against Naaman. They dragged me away from my family. Maybe killed me in the process. And stuck me here doing this job for somebody else. Why should I even bother to tell him about the possibility of a cure. She could have been bitter against God. She might have been old enough to understand that she could have been bitter against God. Who is God to put me here? Why me, God? Why me? Why am I the one who got selected to be a slave? Why am I the one who got selected to be a... Why am I the one who got selected? She could have been very bitter against God. And yet apparently, as a testament to the people she grew up with, mom and dad, she remembered God. Right in the midst of all this nastiness going on around her, she remembers God. Kind of makes you think about Shadrach, Meshach, Abednego, Daniel taking the slaves. And they remembered God. Here is this young girl throwing a life preserver to a drowning man. And you got these three supporting cast members, so to speak. Gehazi, Naaman's servants, the Naaman's wife's maid. And Gehazi says, look, I'm going to go my way. I don't care what God says. That's what Gehazi said. He said, I don't care where God wants me to go, because God's mouthpiece said, go in peace to Naaman, basically. He said, I don't want your money. The glory belongs to God. Keep your money. Go in peace. In fact, there's even the little point where Naaman says, there's going to be a time I'm going to have to go with my master to the temple of his God and hold his hand. Basically, be right there beside him, bowing to this God. He says, please forgive me ahead of time. And he says, go in peace. And Gehazi says, I don't want to go God's way. I'm going to go my way. My way. The servants who stand up and talk to Naaman, what do they say? Look, what's wrong with going God's way? It's our way too. Why not go God's way? His way is going exactly the same way we want to go. His way doesn't hurt us. His way doesn't give us any trouble. Why not go God's way? God's way is fine. Then you've got that young girl. And she says, God's way is the only way. Three different people had their influence on Naaman. Somehow, some way. And the little girl was the one that said, why not go God's way? Because it's the only way to go. Two verses came to mind when I started thinking about this. Verse number 1 was Proverbs 27:17. And that verse says, as iron sharpens iron, so a man sharpens the countenance of his friends. In other words, as iron sharpens irons, your friends will influence you in such a way to make you or help you or lure you into doing something or another. To me, this verse, combined to what we looked at so far, speaks to the fact that we relate to each other in a very significant way. What we do affects other people so much. The people that we surround ourselves with affects us so much. In fact, so much so a huge quote on this was by Booker T. Washington. And Booker T. Washington said, associate yourself with people of good quality, for it's better to be alone than to be in bad company. And how true is that? It's better to be alone than to be in bad company. Might as well do it. Proverbs 12:26 says, the righteous should choose their friends carefully, for the way of the wicked leads them astray. And that's it. As iron sharpens iron, one man sharpens the countenance of another. Those servants that came up to Naaman and said, why not? It's dipping in water. Why not? You came all this way. Why are you balking at what he says to do? Just do it. Because he was in a rage. He was ready to forget the whole shebang. Forget it. I don't care. Do we sometimes, and as much as others influence us, do we sometimes find ourselves in the role of the supporting cast? And if we are finding ourselves in the role of the supporting cast, are we helping or are we hindering someone else's pathway to glory? What am I doing? What am I doing out there? Am I being the person that does the right? Stick my foot out, go to trip somebody up? Am I the person that has the flower on my lapel that water comes out of? Or am I the person that's generally helping? That's the person I want to be, right? I want to be the one that helps other people make it to heaven. Ephesians 4:29, let no corrupt word proceed out of your mouth, but what is good for necessary edification, that it may impart grace to the hearers. What's coming out of your mouth? Naaman didn't know that Gehazi was taking him, was fleecing him, so to speak. Didn't know. Gehazi was speaking lies to him. Gehazi was telling him something that he shouldn't have been telling him. And on the other hand, he had a little girl telling him, you know, if you were in Israel, you could be cured. And are we the Gehazi? Are we the servants? Go God's way because, it doesn't hurt? Are we the little girl? Go God's way because God's way is the right way. 1 Thessalonians 5:11 says, therefore comfort each other and edify one another, just as you also are doing. They were already doing it. Comforting and edifying one another. That means that somebody had to be on the comforting side of the coin. Somebody had to be on the comforted side of the coin. Sometimes we're the comforter, sometimes we're the comfortee, and we have to be part of it. As iron sharpens iron, so a man sharpens the countenance of his friends. The second verse that came to mind was Matthew 17:17. That verse says, and Jesus answered and said, you unbelieving and perverted generation, how long shall I be with you? How long shall I put up with you? Bring them here to me. The apostles were trying to cure a young boy of a demon and couldn't do it. And you can almost see Jesus putting his head in his hand, shaking my head. How long do I have to put up with you people? How long am I going to have to be with you people? You don't have any faith. And it's like it's almost breaking his heart that he has to stand among people who have not enough faith. Jesus has given them power, and they can't cast one single demon out of a kid. Bring the boy here to me, he says. Bring him here to me. 2 Corinthians 4:3-4 says, but even if our gospel is veiled, it is veiled to those who are perishing, whose minds the God of this age has blinded, who do not believe, lest the light of the gospel of the glory of Christ, who is the image of God, should shine on them. There is a foe to be fought. That is exactly what he says at the end of Ephesians. Take up the sword of the Spirit, the shield of faith, the helmet of the gospel, the helmet of salvation. Have your feet shod with the preparation of the gospel. Why does he say these things? Because there is a foe to be fought. If you turn over to 1 Peter 1, or 1 Peter 4, 1-6, and he's talking there about, therefore, since Christ suffered for us in the flesh, arm yourselves also with the same mind, for he who has suffered in the flesh has ceased from sin, that he no longer should live as the rest of his time as in the flesh for the lust of men, but for the will of God. For we have spent enough of our past lifetime in doing the will of the Gentiles, walked in lewdness, lust, drunkenness, revelries, drinking parties, abominable idolatries. In regard to these, they think it strange that you do not run with them to the same flood of dissipation, speaking evil of you. They will give an account to him who is ready to judge the living and the dead. For this reason the gospel was preached also to those who are dead, that they might be judged according to men in the flesh, but live according to God in the Spirit. The bottom line is this. 2 Corinthians 2:14-15. We judge people by what we do not do. You ever thought about that? We were talking a little bit before church. I was in the military. Not everybody's an upright, standing young man in the military. And it makes people mad when they look at us and they say, I'm going to go out drinking. Do you want to go with me? And we're like, no, it's okay. And they know they shouldn't. And when they see us standing up for what is right, they get mad. Why don't you divorce your wife? It'd be easy. Get rid of her. Get a new one. Everybody's doing it. And yet when they see us and we say, no, it's not right, it's not the right thing to do, we judge them by our actions. And they say, and they get mad at us, basically for making them look bad. How long do I have to put up with this perverse generation? How long? Till I can go home, is my thought. So here we are, trying to achieve something, because that's what we're always trying to do. We're trying to achieve something. Whether it's doing our own thing, whether it's going along with God because God's way goes along with our way, or even if, and hopefully if, we're going God's way because God's way is the right way. We still have to make a decision about who or what we want to be. We still have to make a decision on the bottom line about who or what we wish to be and what we want other people to see in us. And when we have a supporting cast standing around us giving us bad information and bad advice, we say, no, I'm going to need to stand with God on this one. And when we're around somebody and they are making bad decisions and they look to you for advice, you have to say, no, I'm sorry, I'm going to have to stand with God on this one. We have to make a decision, which is exactly what Joshua said. Exactly. If you turn over to Joshua 24, 14 and 15, he said, now therefore fear the Lord, serve him in sincerity and truth. Put away the gods which your fathers served on the other side of the river and in Egypt. Serve the Lord. And if it seems evil to you to serve the Lord, choose for yourselves this day whom you will serve, whether the gods which your fathers served that were on the other side of the river, or the gods of the Amorites in whose land you dwell. But as for me and my house, we will serve the Lord. You have to make a decision. You have to make a decision about who am I going to serve? Who am I going to listen to? When I give advice, is it God's advice? When I take advice, is it advice that aligns with God? When we look at all the things in the world that are trying to kill us, devour us, hurt us, Satan goes about as a roaring lion, seeking whom he may devour. As we see all these things, choose you this day who you plan to serve.